thing that really jumps out to me is that 3 years after that came out, 1945, you had one of the great years in terms of being in three very important movies when people think back to that year. And so I just hope very briefly I can touch upon each of those three because they're so significant. The first one reunited you with Hitchcock. So how did you, I believe in the very opening scene we're introduced to you in Spellbound, and then I think we see, how did that come to be? And playing that character must have been kind of fun.
That was fun. The way it happened, I became, I'm proud to say, a friend of Hitchcock's. Mm-hmm. And I was a guest at his home and so on and so forth. So I saw a lot of him. I remember the night before, it just occurs to me, the night before he started, it was a Sunday, he started on a Monday, we played a game of soldiers, which he had. I can't describe it to you. It was like on a chessboard and you move soldiers around. He did this by way of relaxation. I know if it had been me, I would have my nose in a script. But Hitch, he wanted to play a game. Mm-hmm. So I knew Hitch socially well and was a guest of him and loved his wife, Alma. She was a marvelous woman, and his daughter, Pat. And so one day he started shooting Spellbound. Mm-hmm. And I visited him on the set. He said, "Oh, you know, there's this character," and so on and so forth, and would you do it? I said, "Yes, I didn't have to read it," and that was how it came about.
Incidentally, how did your character come to have his name?
The name was the cameraman, Gomes, Lee Gomes.
It was named after.
That was Hitch's joke. You know, Hitch, he had, by the time I got to know him, had calmed down a lot in this regard, but he was known for his fabulous practical jokes, particularly in the old country, in England. But here, he didn't do them much. I didn't know about them very much. One or two I knew about. But actually, he named this character Gomes because he wanted him to be, he's a psychotic, isn't he?
Well, one of the later examples of that he did, which I always find amusing, is in Rear Window, Raymond Burr is dressed and made up with the glasses to look just like David O. Selznick.
No question.
It's amazing.
No question. It was fantastic. Well, Hitch had his problems.
And did you feel, a lot of people say he was sadistic as a director. I didn't get the sense that you felt that way.
Hitch was a beautiful guy. I loved him. I could never spell out what he has meant to me in my life and what he did for me. On the set, he was a joy. He was fun. He had his jokes that he told, usually very rough Cockney jokes, but they were wonderful. And I never saw a moment of that. Now, there was a story that when he was directing in England, some extra began making a pest of himself. So Hitch devised a shot, and he had the assistant director tell the extra, "You're going to get extra for money. This is a great shot. You're going to be in it. It requires you being on the ceiling of the stage, and we're going to rig you up there because there's going to be a descent." So they rigged this guy up to the ceiling of the stage, and Hitch calls lunch.
Well,
and the guy is left up there all through the lunch hour. He didn't bother him anymore.
No. And I mean, I've actually, whether it's Eva Marie Saint or other people who worked with Hitchcock, they say almost universally positive things. The only person who I've interviewed for this who's had less than positive things to say was Tippi Hedren, but it sounds like that was a little complicated.
Complicated is the perfect word. Let's leave it at that.
Sure, absolutely.
It was a dream to be on the set with. You know, you had the sense. I've been very lucky in that sense, because having worked with Hitch, having worked with Chaplin, having worked with Jean Renoir, and Orson at the beginning, although I was in the theater, but still it's the same feeling, that you're with world figures. You're not with some director on the stage.
Scorsese. Scorsese eventually you would do it.
Scorsese eventually, yes. I didn't have as much to do in that picture, but it was very interesting what was given me to do, because it sets the premise of the picture. And I found Scorsese lovely to work with. He was a dream, yeah. Before I forget, he had a wonderful thing. We were shooting on location, Park Slope in Brooklyn. And there was a house that was supposed to be a mansion in the story. And it was large, but not too large. So when we were finally shooting this scene, it was a scene I had with Daniel Day-Lewis. The quarters were cramped. So he had the camera there, but then he had to back up. There wasn't room with the crew and everything into another room on the other side. And I discussed with him the whole thing. I said, you know, I disapprove, I said to him, of the fact that the director is so remote, which is what goes on now all the time. They look at monitors instead.
Yeah.
Hitch used to be right next to the camera, stand looking at you, or sitting looking at you. But that was your audience. Chaplin, he would get under the camera, and he was everywhere. Renoir was there, and that personality, that beautiful personality, was part of your performance, you see. I was going to tell you this thing about Scorsese. It was so great. So we're in another room. We're like in that room, and he's shooting in this room. I go in and tell him that I missed that. He said, well, I'd be in there with you if we had room. I don't have room. I said, okay, and I look. And I see on the monitor, he's got a rear view mirror like you have in an automobile. So that while he's looking at the monitor, if anyone comes in to look over his shoulder, which he wouldn't permit, he didn't want any comments on it, because this is the thing that's happened with this monitor now. You have a committee deciding on is the shot printable or not. You have the cameraman, you have the director, the cameraman, the assistant, the script girl, the producer, the associate producer, of which there are many. Mm-hmm. They all stand there, and it's a committee. It had nothing to do with, you know. It's Hitch had a wonderful thing. He'd say, after when it came to scenes, he'd cut. That's all you need, and that's all you need.
He also had from what I've read, a way of sometimes giving cute direction. Hitchcock, did he have something fun, some kind of a fun direction for you for Spellbound?
No.
There was nothing about sweating?
To me?
He didn't say something, basically, Norm, in this scene, you're supposed to sweat?
He may have, I can't remember it.
That was just that, I read in an older interview that you did where there was a situation where you said it was the funniest piece of directing I ever got.
He may have said it.
How are you supposed to start sweating now?
Yeah, you know, now that you mention it, I think it's come back.
It just sounded like a funny thing.
No, I'm sure it's true. Sure it's true. The other thing is, in regard to we're talking about Scorsese. He had this rearview mirror, and no one could come and stand in back of him and watch this scene. I thought that was great.
Yeah,
because he didn't want opinions.
The second of that year's three major ones that you were part of, you sort of referenced. I don't know if this is chronologically correct, but I know that one of the other two was as you mentioned, The Southerner. And I have to ask you because I believe that Orson Welles would be interviewed and he felt Renoir was the best. I think Chaplin may have said it. A lot of people feel that, and when the greatest movie lists are put out today, international lists, he's always got either Grand Illusion or
Rules of the Game.
Rules of the Game. They're either one or the other or both. Are always in the top 10.
And there are others.
And others, right? And the Southerners, they now have the Criterion
But
collection.
the one about Gabin as a railroad.
Oh, yes.
The Human Beast, La Bête
Yeah,
Humaine.
La Bête Humaine.
And Boudou Saved from Drowning with Michel Simon.
Yes.
And the Marseillaise. There were so many pictures of Jean did, A Day in the Country.
Yes. And they're all, but so for you, he only once, despite all of those great movies, only once was he ever nominated for a Best Director Oscar, and that was for The Southerner. So how did you come to be involved with that?
Was Jean nominated for The Southerner?
That was it. That was the only time.
He was nominated?
Yeah. The
For
only
The
time.
Southerner?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's fascinating. Because one of the things, Mrs. Hitchcock used to call it a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Because Hitch never received an Oscar.
Yeah.
Lubitsch never received one. Garbo never received
Cary
one.
Grant.
Cary Grant never received one. Griffith never received
Garland. Judy Garland.
Who?
Judy Garland never did.
She never got one.
No.
And it was a popularity
Yeah.
contest. Reese Witherspoon got one. I mean, this is the nuttiness of this business.
Yeah.
I mean, but what is your question about Jean?
Just how did it come to be that you were that you got involved with that? And also, I just wanted to make a note here that I made a note that just what your experience getting it and what your experience was doing that. Essentially, that's what I'd like to ask you.
With the Renoir?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you that because I adored him. I loved him. He's all over the size. You see that pot in the corner?
Yes. Yep. I'll just.
Jean made that before he became a movie director.
The family business.
He was a ceramicist.
Yeah. Amazing.
He was a ceramicist, about which I can tell you one of the great stories about Jean, of which there are many, but one that is so great. But he left that for us.
Amazing.
I also have his cap, which I wear on certain particular occasions. But there's a little medal that he got from France up there on the shelf. It's just seated there
Oh yeah.
with a reproduction of it. That's Jean.
There you go. He's a big guy too, like Hitchcock. Two big guys, right?
Well, Jean was broad and heavy, but had a permanent limp. He was wounded in World War One. Mm-hmm. That's how he became a director.
Okay.
They wanted to amputate his leg. He was wounded, cut it off. His mother, Mrs. Pierre Auguste Renoir, prevented them from removing his leg. But he had to sit for a long time with his leg up. And he had been a ceramicist. Beautiful things.
Beautiful.
And one way to pass the time is to watch this new thing called moving pictures. It's about 1919, 1920, or right after the war ended, 1918. And he's watching and watching, and he decided, you know, that's something I could do. And there was a little lake near where he lived. I've been to the lake. And he started directing a little picture around the lake, which leads me into a very beautiful story about him. So now he has announced that he's going to become a director. I'll tell you how I got myself. But he announced how he's going to get in he's going to become a director. So everyone says, Jean Renoir, the son of Pierre Auguste Renoir, he's in for a free ticket. All he'll do is imitate he'll shoot stuff like his father's paintings.
Right. Lilies or whatever, yeah.
Look like it'll be pretty and all, yeah. So he said to my wife and me one day, when he had completed looking at his 50 pictures on 16 millimeter, we were there with him on the last one. He said, you know, they said, oh, he's going to imitate his father, so I did everything possible over the 50 pictures to be as unlike my father as I could be. Now I've seen the 50 pictures, and I realize that all these years I was trying to imitate my father. It was a terrific moment. He died a couple of months after.
Wow.
You had said, well, the Southerner. My agent actually sent me over to be interviewed for this picture. The script wasn't really quite ready. I went in, I met Renoir. Well, I was immediately captivated by this guy. He was like an Idaho potato farmer, big. He dressed not like a Hollywood director, just an ordinary white shirt and khaki pants. And he was a ebullient. He talked like, it is an interesting picture. You go here, you go there. It is from above, and you do that. And he was really great. I mean, I said, my God, what a person. And we hit it off, but immediately. Because he was describing the character, and I said, I got it, I know what you mean. I know I come on with these breeches and so forth. And we started acting, there wasn't any script. We started playing all this stuff. And there was something simpatico right away, and he put me in the picture.
And at that time, had you seen his previous work? I don't know how widely available it was in this country.
I had not.
So you have the right feeling.
Wait a minute, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
What year was that picture? 40?
I think 37 was Grand Illusion, 39 was Rules of the Game.
Yeah, but I had seen Grand Illusion.
Okay.
Not Rules of the Game.
Okay.
I had seen it when it came out in 37. In New York, it was the talk of the town.
Yes.
It was a real hit,
yeah.
Big hit. And so it hit it off, and the relationship became like family. What you got from Jean was, you know, it was a great mind. It was like a great avant-garde mind, and yet at the same time he was so human. His humanity was what he had as a great director, and it's in his pictures. And it's in the way he staged things. You're not aware of staging or camera. It's just happening. There's no artifice in what he does.
The last of those 1945 movies is also by someone who I know you really admired. I think humanity would be the appropriate word again. What had been done years earlier with All Quiet on the Western Front. Now you come to be in A Walk in the Sun, which I know a lot of people feel is one of, if not the great movie about about World War II.
It is. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful movie, and Millie never. When I say Millie, I mean Milestone. Never got the credit. That picture never got the credit it was due it, because of certain difficulties in the financing and so forth. But that picture, and I've seen it recently, is marvelous. And I know Sam Fuller used to say, oh, well, you don't see blood, you don't see, I mean, what the hell, when there's no fighting, what's going on? That was the whole point.
Yeah.
That they kept marching and marching and marching until they found the place and they all get killed.
And now that you mention it, it really makes you think he may have done the definitive World War I and World War II movie.
All Quiet is a masterpiece.
Yeah,
masterpiece. Milestone was a marvelous guy, and I did get very close to him too. I did with all these guys.
How did you guys first connect with, in that case, with Milestone? Because I know, it would, as you say, it would, as it became closer, you, in some ways that led to other opportunities in your own other things that you would do. So how did you, just for the record, how did you two first cross paths?
How did I first get with Milestone?
Yes.
Again, he was casting a picture. And the picture was this picture.
Yes.
And my agent brought me over to see him, to meet him. For a particular part, Archambault. And we had a very good meeting. And I always have strongly suspected. The meeting was good. And I left with my agent. Now, in the room at the time was the fellow who was going to do the music, called Earl Robinson. The music starts, "Oh, they took a little walk in the warm Italian sun." Millard Lampell did the words. And Earl Robinson and I had been in a theater group together in New York, off-Broadway, that Kazan had directed, a play called Crime by Michael Blanford. Nick Ray was in the cast, Marty Ritt was in the cast. These are all ham actors. Mm-hmm. They became directors. Right. They got wise. And Earl was in the cast. And he wrote music for this little theater that we belonged to. As I was going out, I saw Earl go over to Millie, to Milestone, and sort of whispered to him, and I knew that a big blow had been struck in my favor. And I've always really thanked Earl for solidifying the meeting. He made it happen. And
that relationship, in turn, you would, from what I understand, from what I've read, you, I don't know if you made an observation or a suggestion or something to Milestone, but you, during the making of A Walk in the Sun, but you apparently impressed him enough to say, "Come on and advise me on the other side of the camera in the future."
What happened was that while we were shooting A Walk in the Sun, we'd be standing around waiting to set up the show, and we'd talk. And it was just an exchange of talk. And also, at about that time, I made a big hit in a theater out here in Valpone, playing Mosca in Valpone. And Milestone had seen that. So he combined that, the theater thing, and he always had a great love of the theater thing. He brought the whole group theater out at one point to make a movie. They didn't make it, but he brought them out. And he loved theater people. And he, as a matter of fact, his assistant, Doc Burtonson, had been a part of the inside group at the Moscow Art Theater. Millie was Russian. Doc Burtonson had been an assistant to Danchenko, who was Stanislavski's partner. So Millie had a great feeling for all that, and his art director was Nick Remisov, who was from the old country, the Russian theater. And he remained very Russian in many respects. He had a wonderful face. He looked like a Russian general, and so on. I have a picture, I'll show it to you there. And he, with the performance, and then my talking about this and that and the other thing, and just about material and characters and so forth in general, not anything to do with the play, just he decided he wanted to move me in back of the camera, and he was right. And so I was under contract to Metro at the point that he made the offer, and fortunately, a picture came up they wanted me to do that I thought was terrible, and I wouldn't do it. And Billy Grady, who was head of the talent there, said, "Throw his clothes out on the Washington Boulevard, that son of a bitch." So I got my clothes and I went to work for Milestone.
So you were happy.
Oh boy, behind the camera. And what it did also, interestingly enough, was raise me socially in this town onto the highest level because Millie and Kendall, his wife, who Millie was Russian. He learned to speak English in New York on 47th Street and Broadway in front of a United Cigar Store. So his speech was very colorful. He married a Lee of Virginia. Well, but they threw the greatest parties. They had the most wonderful parties. And socially, these parties were on the highest level. And my wife and I were invited to them and became part of it. And I used to work with Millie every day at his house. We developed Arch of Triumph and a couple of other pictures, but it's a relationship, if I could write well enough, which I can't, it's almost Dostoevskian, because how this man, whom Jim Tully, if that name means anything to you, he was a hobo novelist. He thought that Milestone had in him to be another Serge Eisenstein. And he may have. At the time he did All Quiet.
Yeah.
And you know, he was the first guy to work with Howard Hughes. 2 Arabian Nights, the front page. But Millie was a combination of a guy who he loved the good life. He loved sitting and spinning yarns, drinking, and having a good time.
You refer to the being under contract, and I think there are 2 things that come to my mind that I have to ask you about because there aren't too many other people I can ask them about because they are over. It appears. The first is certainly over. That's the studio system, and so I just want to ask you before I ask you about the second. As far as the studio system, which collapsed or fell in, was forced to collapse within a few years after you signed with MGM. A lot of actors who I've interviewed have said some said they loved it. They felt it gave them opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise had to be developed and groomed into more fully matured performers. Others said they felt like they were imprisoned. They could do a hit and they're still getting paid the same, low wage that they signed up for in the first place, and it was constraining, and you have to go on dates with certain people, and you have to do... So my question for you is, where do you fall on that question?
I fall for the studio system.
You do. Have you always felt that way?
Yes. I didn't feel imprisoned because I wasn't there long enough. Mm-hmm. There were so many reasons why the studio system functioned at the time that this town was the best. And if they want what they want today and go out and peddle and see if they can get money from shoe companies or whatever they get the money from, and have half a dozen producers getting credits on the pictures, getting money from Canal and then from this one and that one and have all the elements. What advantage is that over the studio system? Mm-hmm. And the studio system had certain things that were particularly right for the picture business, which was the distribution, mm-hmm. the making of so many pictures, the facilities. It had everything. Yeah. When I was at Metro, there were 300 actors, I believe, on the contract. And it's true that Gable and Tracy got the good parts. That's all right. But the fact is, you felt you were part of something that was working. What was better not to be there, to be between jobs, looking for work? There's no question it was best. And it was at that time that the business flooded the country and became the great entertainment that it did become, particularly during the Depression. Yeah. During the Depression, movies became
flourished,
large.
Yeah.
Today, I can't answer about what would happen today because there's so many complications and differences. Yeah.
The other thing that's gone, but I'm less confident in saying it's gone forever because there seem to be. You can never say with this. That is the blacklist. The idea that, and the way I wanted to phrase it to you is this, because again, it's come up in other interviews. A couple of people who I'm sure you know, Marcia Hunt, a few others have talked a little bit about it, but I wanted to make sure to ask you. So the way I wanted to phrase it was, for young people who may not know, what was Red Channels? How do you think it came to include your name? And what sort of an impact did it have on your life and your career until Hitchcock came back into the picture?
I'm going to start at the end about Hitchcock.
Sure.
Because I was having difficulty getting work. And MCA, which was then a major organization this town, for whom I had been working when they first went into television, before the blacklist. We used to make pictures in a couple of days over at the old Eagle Lion Studios. We'd make these half-hour pictures. We'd wait till we got 8 scripts together, then shoot them. One day, we were informed, I don't know who informed whom, but the information came out that I could no longer work for them. And that existed over a period of years. I went back into the theater and I was one of the guys who started the Phoenix. It was started by T. Edward Hambleton and Nowry Houghton. But Hume Cronin and I were the first directors and first actors. We acted in it and directed it. And there was no picture work and really no television work, an occasional shot here or there. In that period, though, in 1951...
That's when Red Channels came out?
You've got me. I don't know the exact date.
That's okay.
But it began, but I happened to get a job directing for the Ford Foundation, the Lincoln films that James Agee wrote, of which I'm very proud.
Mm-hmm. Omnibus, right?
Had you ever seen them?
I've only been able to read about them. I'd love to see them. But this was for the Omnibus.
Omnibus, the first show of Omnibus.
Yes.
And I directed all of them.
Amazing.
Jim Agee
yes.
cast me in the thing. And I'm very proud of them. They're very beautiful. His scripts were beautiful. And we made them out there where Lincoln was and all that kind of thing. But somehow I got away to do that because we shot it out in Illinois, although the first was shot at Fox over on 10th Avenue in New York. However, once I came back, I couldn't get any jobs on television. There were 1 or 2 exceptions. But in that great period of the television golden age, I did one. Maybe a show, maybe not. In 1957, Hitchcock had been on the air for 2 years with the Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And MCA... Oh, and the decree had been from these guys in Syracuse, these who owned supermarkets, and they were behind Red Channels, I think.
And who were they? What was their story?
Huh?
What was their story? Why would anyone listen to what they were saying?
They wouldn't handle the product unless...
You mean
in their
advertising?
stores.
Oh.
Unless you adhered to what they said.
So you're saying they would boycott advertisers of the show? Okay. So
Back in Syracuse, which seeped out.
And how did they get their names? What's their source? They're out in Syracuse. What the heck do they know about Hollywood?
They got them. People talked. Some told lies, and so forth. Now, for a period of about 4 or 5 years, I didn't work in the mass media, with one or two exceptions. Remember, George Roy Hill got me in a show on something else. MCA had, meanwhile, in 1955, started into television with, they had been in, when I had done these half-hour things that we waited for, it was an MCA thing. But around 1955, they got Hitchcock to say he would do television, which was a big thing. And in 57, the order for the half-hour show was amplified. With a new series called Suspicion. I think Suspicion had many shows, hour shows, and MCA took 10 of them. New York took 10, and this one took 10, and so forth. And with the 10 that he was adding on, they used to do 39 half hours a season. It was, his producer was Joan Harrison, from whom I really learned how to be a producer. She was divine. She was beautiful, exquisitely dressed, in perfect taste for the set. I mean, wonderful tailored clothes and things like that. She was divine. She had been a writer for him. And she was now his producer. And they needed someone else to come in and help her because of the quantity of the work. Not only the half hours, but now the hour. So she and Hitch decided they wanted me to do it. Because I also knew Joan very well. And so they presented my name. However, and this was told me by Alan Miller, who headed television at MCA. He came back, Alan Miller, from the network, and says, there seems to be a problem about Norman Lloyd. And Hitch said, I want him. That was the end of the blacklist.
This is before Preminger hired Dalton Trumbo. This is before Kirk Douglas hired Dalton Trumbo.
It was 1957.
Right. So this was really the beginning of the end for the blacklist.
But it was only for me.
Right.
With those guys, they did it on
They
a
had to
bigger
wait.
basis with the big picture, the Exodus, and the...
Did you get any feedback from others who were going through what you were going through? Did they feel that this was a ray of light at the end of the tunnel, that it was going to get better? Did you have any kind of a, I'm sure others in your same situation you must have been in touch with.
Well, no, because one didn't talk about it. Some guys did. That is to say, the guys who really received subpoenas, and I never received any, and there was no reason to. The reason I got in all was that I did act with a lot of left-of-center groups. The first company I was in with Kazan was the Theater of Action, with Nick Ray, as I told you, Marty Ritt, and all the guys. Marty Ritt was actually blacklisted, wasn't he?
I believe so. I'm not sure.
The equivalent, I'll tell you. Nick Ray, I don't know, he was mysterious. But there were people, so that was a left-of-center thing. The Living Newspaper was considered left-wing.
The group?
Huh?
The group?
The group, yeah. My God. Bomb throats. So, you see...
Even I can't imagine this was a reason for that happening, but wasn't Dorothy Parker wrote some things, including what made it into Saboteur, that were a little bit questionable for some people.
Dorothy Parker was virtually blacklisted. She had to move back to New York. And she was considered left. And Milestone, he had to go to Europe.
So they didn't like your friends.
Huh?
They didn't like your friends.
I didn't like my friends. And Milestone, he was friends with the Russians.
Right.
Ilya Ehrenberg, who was the leading Russian journalist of the time, was a great friend of Milestone's. And he made, and when it was during the war, when Simonov, who wrote The Russian People, which was a successful war play, came over, he immediately looked up Milestone, he was Russian.
Yeah.
He was for Russia. But it spread out. It was,
But if they had said to you, and this is just semantics, I'm going to ask
Yes.
you, but let's say you had been called there and they say, Mr. Lloyd, are you now or have you ever been a communist? Well, what kind of an answer do you think? You were not, right? I mean, even if you were, it wouldn't have mattered, but you were not yourself, right?
Yeah. So what do you do?
Right.
There were people. I'm trying to think. I know Marshall was blacklisted.
Yes.
But
And-
she never testified.
No, and I think, wasn't Betty Garrett to some extent?
Yes. Well,
More her husband.
yes. Both.
Yeah.
But Larry, he was a lovely man, her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful guy. And he finally did the thing that, I'm sure stayed with him all his life. He gave names.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
See, this is the one thing you could not do. You could not give names. Even E.M. Foster said that.
And do you think, and Kazan,
This is the thing against Kazan, you see.
yeah.
And he never got over it. You see it in his face. I saw a recent interview with him, and not, he's dead now.
Right, but that aired.
But the other day, and you see in his face what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you see, although Gadge testified, well, let me go back a step. When I did this play with him, called Quiet City, we were working one day, just the two of us, on the script. That is to say, he was directing, and we were talking about the part I was doing. And we were in the dressing room, just the two of us, at the Belasco Theater. And he told me then, and this was long before the Un-American Committee, he told me then, he said, I'm quitting all that. I'm leaving them. Because they tell me what to do and so on. He objected to being ordered what to do, whatever that was. I can't even remember the specifics of it, but I do remember the result, that he said, he's through. That's it. That's it. Now, the truth of the matter is that it may be insofar as his membership was concerned, but the fact is that all his plays, all his work virtually, remain politically left. I mean, what the hell is On the Waterfront?
I know, and that's after the fact of
That's
his,
after
yeah.
that, you see.
Yeah.
And what is Facing the Crowd in its way?
Yeah.
And what is we did those
He
things.
did Tree Grows in
Huh?
Tree Grows in Brooklyn was early. That didn't
No.
really have anything. I'm
No, it was
thinking a
before.
streak. Right, and I'm thinking. So we're talking after what 51?
Is it? You've got me on the date. Yeah.
What was it? Well, anyway.
The point is,
Yeah.
it didn't change what he really felt.
Right. You couldn't.
Zanuck, according to legend, Zanuck had him in the oven and said, or Scorus did, because he was the same breed.
Mm-hmm. Who's that?
Kazan.
No, but who's the same breed?
Scorus
Scores. Okay.
said to him, your career is at stake. So he chose to do what he did. And he made a deal with Odets. They had a deal. You name you, and I name me, or whatever, exchange of naming.
Mm-hmm.
My own feeling, so was remote. I mean, it was called like a gray list. And I never got into the terrible decisions of what it meant to go with a lawyer and the whole thing. But I don't see, I cannot accept, and I liked Kazan as a guy, I did. But once he gave names, I don't see that. You can't do that. You cannot do that.
Did you ever cross
You
paths with him?
cannot do that. You can do anything. You cannot hand over people.
Did you ever see him again after that happened? How did you handle that?
We both had a mutual dear, dear friend, Carl Malden.
Yeah.
And two things. One day Carl calls and he says, "Hey, when you and Peggy come over for dinner tonight, or Wednesday night, or whatever night." Oh, delighted. We go over. There's Kazan, who was totally responsible for Malden's career. I mean,
Sure. Streetcar on the waterfront.
Baby Doll.
Right.
You just name the pictures, all the pictures. And Carl's a wonderful guy, and his darling wife. And Peggy and I just froze for a minute. It was almost an instinct to walk out, but couldn't. So we stayed, and I remember we talked about baseball. And Kazan introduced it, like, the subject for tonight is baseball. He didn't want to talk about anything else. Neither did I. And we did. We talked baseball. Now, when some years later, Carl was president of the Academy, he then arranged to have this special award, Oscar, to go to Kazan. Now, Kazan had won an Oscar for...
Twice.
For what?
I know he won for Gentleman's Agreement.
A Gentleman's Agreement.
And then I think he won for On the Waterfront. Both.
He did. Didn't Waterfront win for picture?
And director.
And director.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he had two.
Yeah. When he came up with this idea for the special award, I didn't say anything. Time passes. I get a call from Carl. "Hey, Norman, I haven't heard anything from you about Gads getting this Oscar that he's be coming out for." I said, "Carl, we're great friends. Let's not talk about it." And that was it.
Just quick, incidentally, do you know Norma Barsman?
I have met her. I can't truthfully say I know her. I met her in the market.
Yeah.
So
The only reason I ask is we're going to be meeting with her tomorrow for...
I think you're going to find a wonderful subject.
The last two things I hope we can do are, one, to ask you about the final immortal person you worked with, who we haven't talked about really, who's Chaplin. And then...
Genius. Let's just sum it up.
Yeah. And then the other thing is this thing that I do, which it's sort of called rapid fire. The way to end it is just the first thing that comes to your mind about a few.
Okay.
So as far as Chaplin, I just about 2 months ago maybe had the opportunity, and I see your poster of Limelight through the wall here, or through the room. I had the opportunity to do a very extensive interview with Claire Bloom, which was a thrill because I didn't think I'd have a reason I'd be able to get to her. But then she turns up in The King's Speech, and so she was available for an interview. So that was nice. But obviously, the highlight, as she says, of her life was Limelight. So I got to talk a lot about that, and now I get to talk to you again because here we are, the last film he ever made in this country, and I know you'd met him long before, so maybe if you can lead into your involvement in that film through how you just came to know this guy was probably, at his height, the most famous person who was alive at a certain time of maybe the 20s, 30s in the world.
Charlie, at what time, particularly in the 20s, when he was making those wonderful 1 and 2 reelers, was the single most famous person in the world. In the world. And the way I got to know him was he had a great friend named Tim Durant. And Tim was a very good tennis player. And Tim was a very social guy, a lovely guy. Charlie used to say about Tim, he wears well. And Tim, when I came out in 44, again, after I'd gone back after Saboteur, I came out again in 44 for Houseman to make a picture of Paramount. I immediately looked up Joe Cotton, with whom I was friendly from the Mercury. We actually shared a dressing room together at one time at the Mercury and all that. And Joe had wonderful Sundays at his house. And they were built around tennis. And then there was food, but tennis. And as a matter of fact, and it was there I met Tim Durant. It's there I also met this guy who came on the court in bare feet, with his hair all over the place. Ole Cassini brought him. It was John F. Kennedy.
Oh my God!
Right out of the Navy. Right out of the Navy. Just starting to play on the tennis court in bare feet. I said, he'll never be president. Yeah. Anyway, what happened was that it was there that I met Tim Durant. And we started to play, and there was a mutual respect about the playing. So one day, Tim asked me if I'd like to go up and play at Chaplin's with him. He was a great friend of Charlie's, very close to Charlie. Would I like to go up there and play in a doubles match with Tim and Charlie, and I forgot who before. At times, later on, the fourth was Bill Tilden. So,
wow.
Whom Charlie loaned the court. Because Bill had gotten into trouble, and Charlie let him have the court. It was great. But I don't recall Bill being at that first time I played doubles up there. As a consequence of that doubles match, I then was invited back by Tim each time. He brought me along. And then one day the phone rang, and it was Charlie's butler, Watson, who was the original butler from The Butler Did It. You know that sketch?
Yeah,
The Butler Did It.
Yeah, the lights go out or something, yeah.
And Watson, not only that, he was the ultimate snob. He had wooden teeth like George Washington. And he looked down on the Chaplins because he had been the butler for Lady Mendel, and he felt she gave better parties. Not to mention that Charlie would have Nehru as a guest, or some great international figure. Oh no, Lady Mendel, she gave the party. You see? Anyway, what happened was that after several invitations to play doubles up there with Tim, then the invitations came just for me. And Tim would be there or not, he might be traveling on. Then, in those days, we were lithe enough to play singles. And Charlie would have Watson call me, could I come up and play singles? So I would go up there and play singles with Charlie. And as a consequence of that, after a time, we would sit and talk in the tennis house as the sun went down, and we had these wonderful conversations about everything. And then Charlie one day said, would you like to come up and have a Scotch old-fashioned? He loved Scotch old-fashions. And so I went up and had a Scotch. That became a customary thing. And I was playing with him about 4 times a week, you see, singles. And then one day he said, would you like to stay for dinner? I said, love to. He said, well, ask your wife. And I called Peggy, and she came over. And it turned out that she and Una, Charlie's wife, struck up a great friendship. And that's how all that happened through the tennis. And then one day Charlie said to me, he'd seen me in Valpone, which he approved of. And he said to me one day, this is before he asked me if I would be in Limelight. But he said, look, he said, do you have anything in mind that you want to do? He knew I had to work behind the camera with Milestone. I said, yes, well, anything you want to do. He said, I'll go half with you and I'll put up the money. And here I was standing, and my mind went back to when I was a baby in a high chair. That would be 1915, 1916. And the great toy was a Charlie Chaplin that you wound up. And he did the walk. And my mind went back to that moment when I was in the high chair. And I said, here's the guy saying, I'll do anything you want to do, we'll go there. So that's when I came up with They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And we bought it. And we owned it for 16 years.
And you were going to do it.
And when they cut him off in the middle of the ocean and said he couldn't come back unless he passed a moral turpitude test, he said, I'll never make another picture in America. And he never did.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Limelight was the last picture. Although Bob Aldrich, who was the assistant director on it, said to me one day, he was a dear friend, and we'd made The Southerner together and Arch of Triumph together, and No Minor Vices with Milestone together. Bob Aldrich said to me one day, listen, this picture's going to be his last, meaning Limelight. I know it, I got to get on my picture. Bob hadn't directed yet, he was an assistant director.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you got to do something, Norman. So one day I'm sitting on the sun porch with Charlie, and I'd read the script, and Charlie says to me, you know, things are getting very difficult. Costs are going up, and he financed his own pictures himself. Costs are going up, it's very expensive. I need someone who can drive this thing through so that we get through right on schedule. I said, Charlie, I know the man. I said, he's not an assistant director, he's a top sergeant. Charlie hired him.
And yet, I know from reading one of the things that you said, he complained he's a great actor, but he's not a great director, right? He felt.
Oh, the great stuff. Well, that's because where did you see that, in a book?
Some other interview where Chaplin he does his own thing. He takes his time, right? So that was the problem that Aldrich had.
You know what provoked all that? Bob Aldrich used to stand in back of Chaplin. And Charlie used to, what I used to call scratch his ass. Say, what am I going to do now? And he'd stand in back of Chaplin, and because Bob Aldrich was a stickler for the schedule and getting out on time and the whole thing, he would go like this, behind Charlie. He was going crazy because Charlie was going, I don't know. So, God, you'd be doing this all the time. Charlie decided to fix him. And what he did, I got to check one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on.
Sure.
Just a second.
Sure.
Anyway, that's when Charlie, in retrospect, decided he was going to fix Bob. And that's what he did. The thing of coming in at 9 o'clock. You know the story?
No.
He came in at 9 o'clock one morning. He had on a top coat that he must have come over with back in 1914. And he had his thick glasses on. And he wore this old hat. He came on the set and he looked at Bob and he said, well, what's going on? Oh, he said, what's the first scene? Who's in the first scene? And Bob said, well, you are Mr. Chaplin. I said, oh, what scene is that about? Well, he said, Bob, the way his mind works, it's scene 28. Charlie said, don't give me numbers. What is the scene about? He said, well, it's a scene where you come in and start to make up. No, I don't feel like doing that scene. What else is there? He says, well, scene 29. He said, I told you I don't want numbers. What is the scene about? He said, well, it's Buster Keaton comes in and the two of you. He said, no, I don't feel like doing that scene. What else have you got? He went through the whole schedule. And finally, he said, no, I don't feel like acting today. I just feel like directing. Find me something to direct. And it's then that I was standing by and Bob came over to me and said, son of a bitch, he's the greatest actor in the world, but he can't direct, he can't direct.
That is funny. Well, all right, now that brings us to this last bit, the rapid fire that I mentioned, and this is just...
Oh, I'll tell you one thing that
sure,
you love
please.
Claire Bloom.
Please.
Because I was there for her whole coming there
Yes,
and the whole
and she was starstruck, she says.
She was, but I knew she'd made a test, and Mrs. Lloyd and I had dinner with Charlie and Una one night up at the house, and Charlie said, let's go down to the studio and look at the test of this girl. And we went down and saw this test of Claire, and Charlie obviously wanted to know our reaction. We said, just lovely, lovely, beautiful. But he didn't make a decision right away. He waited, and he kept her there. And so she would come down to the tennis court. Now, the tennis court, there was a tennis house that looked down on the court. And Claire would sit on the balcony looking down at the players. And she'd be there very often when we were playing, because she was waiting. And one day I was behind her, and I looked at the back of her neck, and it was like an iron rod. And I said to my wife, to Peg, I said, this girl's going to get that part, because I've seen the back of her neck, and that neck will never bend. And she got the part. And I was still sure. I knew she'd get the part when I saw the back of her neck.
That is so
She sat there, she was iron. Yeah.
And you remember just because you know what the truth is, she'll probably get a big kick out of hearing or reading the transcript of this conversation. Do you remember anything else about her during that movie? Okay.
Come with me, you too. That's Charlie with Una in Claire's costume. What happened was he cut the picture, and he decided after that, after studying it, he needed a couple of long shots of the character that she played. And so she had now been back in England, and it was almost 6 months, and he was not going to send for her. So Una doubled as Claire.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's the only picture of its kind in the world.
I gotta just get a little closer. Amazing. And I guess Una and Claire became friendly.
Very friendly.
Yeah.
And Una and my wife became very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So to bring this whole thing to a close, this is just the first sentence or two, whatever your gut reaction is to these topics. The first is that I read that in 1939 you were on television in 2 productions. I didn't even realize there was television in 1939. So I have to ask, just how did that happen? That's pretty much it.
Well, there was this new thing, television, and NBC set apart on the 3rd floor a couple of radio studios where they were going to do television, and they did 2 productions, and I was in both of them. One was Don Busicol's The Streets of New York, and both were directed by Anthony Mann. And in The Streets of New York with me was a girl named Phyllis Isley, who became Jennifer Jones. So in '39, they set aside these 2 shooters, and the way the television was shot, here was the camera, the set was against the wall. You shot this scene, and you rolled over here and shot another scene, another set, then you went over here and shot another set. This is the way they did television. And
Were people watching it? Because they didn't have television, so who was seeing this?
I don't know. The other play we did was Missouri Legend, which had been in the theater with Dean Jagger, and he came to do it on television. But if you say, was anyone watching? While I was making this one day, I was in the elevator, and who should walk in with a very beautiful page but Frank Lloyd Wright. He had just given an interview, apparently, because they were talking about it, and he said, "I don't know why one does this, no one watches." So the one time I saw Frank Lloyd Wright. But,
That is funny.
But they discontinued because the war broke out. Oh, we got in the war, and that was the end of it. But that was the beginning of television, of which 5 minutes exist, of a scene with me and George Coulouris and an actor named Johnny Cole. And I am here to tell you, it's the worst acting you could ever imagine. It is so bad, it's good. It just turns around the corner of everything. It is just terrible.
That is funny.
And I thought,
do you have that clip?
no, I tell you who does have it. The Museum of Television, Radio and Television,
Okay.
the Paley
Yes.
Museum.
Yes.
They have it.
Okay. Now I'm going to be genuine with rapid fire. These are sort of ones that only require. You'll only want to give a 1-word answer to this. So you worked with 5 of the people who would probably be. They could be a list of the 5 greatest directors of the 20th century. You got Wells, Chaplin, Hitchcock, Renoir, Scorsese. From your experiences, based on your experiences, if you had a gun to your head and someone said you have to tell us who of the greats was the greatest, who is it?
You can't answer that. I'm not being clever.
No.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
They're different.
Mm-hmm.
There was no one greater than Hitch in what he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he invented a milieu that they still... And he actually is the most famous director who ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Before
And you can't be better than Hitch. He was the best. But then you can't be better than Renoir because in what he did, he achieved something. Geez, those pictures. I mean, they're so human. So the humanity. Chaplin you can't define him. He was a genius and encompassed everything. Everything. I watched him recently in one of the shorts from the old days. And I said to my wife, you know, the so-called Stanislavski method, just watch Charlie do this old tramp. Everything is in there. I mean, I'm going to show you a picture. Stay where you are. Not one that I took, but something. Stay where you are. How can you be a greater actor than this? Look at that. Look at this picture.
That's from one of the shorts, or where is
It
this?
must be. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll look and see. I didn't check.
I don't think it says, but that is yeah.
I mean, look at that.
Mm-hmm. As a fan of his, did you have a favorite moment of his movies?
Yes. Let me put this back.
Sure.
All right, I can put it here for the moment.
Okay.
I would have to say, you know, people play games about what are the greatest moments and so forth. And the game usually finally comes down to Chaplin, the last close-up in City Lights with the rose. Well, you can. Now, you know, I once asked Charlie, I said, Charlie, how did you arrive at that? He said, well, it was the last day of shooting. It was 10 o'clock at night. It was the last shot of the picture. He said, I was totally exhausted. I didn't have an idea in my head. We had to get this shot. So when they put the camera down, I said, roll 'em. Do they? He said, I just looked in the camera and just this idea came to put the rose in my mouth. That was it. Out of sheer exhaustion, like nothing between him and the moment that he wanted. It was nothing.
And I think I think that is the greatest moment in movie.
But there are moments with him, you know, in The Kid, when little Jackie Coogan is pleading, when the cops take the kid away from him, and the kid is pleading to come back to him, that scene between the two of them, I defy you to find a greater emotional scene in the history of movies. I mean, you break down watching this. No, Chaplin, again, you can't compare Chaplin and Hitchcock and Renoir. They're just, see, Orson had a theatricality, but he never had the humanity of these guys. And Hitch, in his way, had humanity because he really saw England for what it was. He reflected England at a certain time, or the constant irony, as well as all the other things. But if you wanted to know France in the period, look at Renoir. If you want to know England of a period, those early English pictures are so much a world.
Having enjoyed a career that spans literally, it's funny, but the Mercury Theater through Modern Family, the question that I have for you is, what is the highlight? If you could go back to one moment out of the past, what is the highlight in your own mind? I know it's another one of these questions that you could say it's impossible, but does something really stand out as the most special moment for you?
I can't say it. I'll tell you why. There are highlights. I've always thought, whether I'm right or not, I don't know, that the best work I ever did was in the theater. That is to say, that not only the living newspapers, where I played clown, but Sinner the Poet, The Fool in King Lear with Lou Calhern, playing the fool was a treasure. Valpone here, which, oh Christ. Oh, the one moment.
Yeah, but that's...
But you see, I often think back now about the work I've done, and it's been adventurous and interesting, but I came to the conclusion that the most profound work I did was as an actor in the theater. I've directed in television, I've directed in the theater, I've directed musicals, I've directed, you know, I won the Golden Apple, which I directed, won the Critics Award, the New York Critics Award, all that kind of thing. I've always had the theory that if you start as an actor, no matter what you do, write, direct, produce, you always are an actor.
So
So I can't give you one thing.
that's fine. But okay, so the parting question is this: what is the secret to not only getting to be 96 years old and on, but getting there and going on in such good form, and it seems like you're very healthy and happy and
Well, I have a tennis match tomorrow morning, and I'm playing in the Directors Guild tournament Monday, tennis tournament, which I won 5 years ago. But since this year, doubles. But they have brought in now. Do you play tennis?
Oh, I played in high school and college, and my mom played professionally in South Africa.
She did.
Yes.
Under a name I would know.
Maybe she played with a lot of big, Virginia.
The South Africans had wonderful players.
Yeah, she was. This would have been back in the '60s and '70s. Her name was Pamela Krieger at that time.
Pamela what?
Krieger.
I didn't know.
Yeah, it was not. She at that time. South Africans weren't so welcomed in international tournaments.
That's right.
But she was one of the good ones.
But do you still play?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Well, but I think
You're playing singles or doubles?
I play now whatever I can. But when I played in high school and college, I played for Brandeis. I played for my high school. Our high school won the state tournament.
What high school?
Amity in Connecticut, Amity High School. But I want to. It is a game that you can play for your whole life.
I'm 96. I played since I was 8 years old, and still don't keep my eye on the ball. I have this running line. Norman, look at the ball.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. It's good to meet a good tennis player.